All right, so we'll go ahead and start the 6:30 session. Would you please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so we'll be moving on to petitions and communications. And this is a time when anyone may address the commission regarding items that are not listed as public hearings tonight. The public hearings scheduled on tonight's agenda are the Dutch Brothers Coffee, the Comprehensive Plan Amendment, and the shops at Ralston Creek. Additionally, we would ask that you would hold comments that you may have regarding any application which has been filed with the city or which is likely to be filed with the city until the public hearing on those items, where we will welcome comments. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the commission regarding anything else tonight? No, seeing none. I think we have a short and quick announcement first before we move on.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, I wanted to introduce Samantha Ford, who's seated to my left. She's a CU law student graduating in the spring, and she has an interest in land use. She's observing tonight.
Excellent. Welcome. All right, so moving on to public hearings. At this time, I'd like to explain the procedure for public hearings. The applicant will be given an opportunity to make a presentation. After the presentation, I will ask those who are in favor of the applicant to speak, and then those who are in opposition. The applicant will then be given an opportunity for rebuttal. After all the testimony has been heard, the public input portion of the hearing will be closed and questions will be taken from the Planning Commission. And I think maybe we'll limit comments to 5 minutes tonight. Does that seem, yeah? And I'd like to also, just as a reminder, or maybe a reminder for some, maybe new information for others. This is a public hearing, so things like supportive applause and things like that aren't considered appropriate. So please just don't, if somebody makes a comment that you really agree with, please don't make any outward gestures to that effect. And then likewise, if you're making comments and somebody or a number of people have already made similar comments, you can get up and just kind of state for the record that you agree with previous comments, and you don't have to necessarily restate everything unless there's something substantive that you want to make sure is covered. And then I would also like to make a point that there was, we put together a list of the actual specific decision criteria, and that was made available both online and outside on the desk. And I would just ask that if you do, when you do address the committee tonight, the commission tonight, that you try to address specifically those decision criteria. This being a land use issue, we really can't get into anything outside of those decision criteria. So we really have to make sure that you'll notice that our comments and questions will be very specific to those criteria, and the testimony that you give will be very helpful if it's kind of specific to that criteria as well, likewise. All right, so I'd like to now swear in anyone that wishes to speak at any public hearing matter before this commission. Please raise your right hand, and I'll swear you all in now. Oh my God, did I scare you all away? No. All right, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in matters before this commission is the truth and nothing but the truth? If so, please swear. Please answer, I do. Thank you. You may be seated.
Mr. Chairman, the first item on the agenda, Dutch Brothers, does not actually need to be opened as a public hearing, but simply called up on the agenda for a motion to vacate.
Okay. And would anybody like to make a motion to vacate? That's weird. It says John Sullivan. That must be you.
That must be me.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I move that Z2015-0012 Dutch Brothers Coffee rezoning from P1 Professional Office to PUD BP Planned Unit Development Business Professional and PDP 2015-0011 Preliminary Development Plan located at 8399 Ralston Road be vacated.
Is there any discussion of the motion? I got to clear the screen here. I'm having technical difficulties. Okay, seeing none. Is there some? Okay. Commissioners, cast your votes. And that passes 5-0 with all commissioners present voting in favor. Can somebody come help me make a change on this? So Steve Hannon's name is in my spot, and we're flip-flopped. So, and I don't necessarily need that, but if it's going to mess up the record as you mark down who makes what votes. No worries. So you want to clear? I should.
He should just switch. We can just switch names. We're gonna switch chairs. Might be easier.
Steve, I could re-message you right now. I could put H-A-N-N-A-N. Perfect. Okay, so motion to vacate, passed. All right, moving on. Do we need a separate motion, Mr. Randall or Mr. Simpson, for the rezoning and for the preliminary PDP?
I believe the motion as presented was.
For both? Okay, perfect. All right, so moving on to the comprehensive plan amendment. Staff, yeah, there's a presentation from staff? Okay, perfect.
Good evening. I am Meredith Winskoski with Design Workshop. We are the consultant that's been working with the city on this effort for about the past year. Why a master plan? This master plan is an update to the 2001 Parks, Trails, and Open Space Master Plan, really to ensure that the city's park system meets the needs of the growing community and the changing demographics. From 2015 to 2025, the city is projected to grow about 15.5%. If the city makes no new improvements to parks, trails, and open space, the current levels of park system service and quality of maintenance will decline. Arvada's population is also aging and becoming more diverse, and the park system needs to accommodate these changes. Throughout our process, we've gathered feedback from over 1,200 members of the community through public meetings, roundtable meetings, committees, and working groups. We've worked to align the plan with previous planning efforts and solicited input from key partners like Jeffco Open Space and Apex. So this plan includes 4 themes that really organize the content and reflect the community values. The 4 themes being community, parks, wellness, and nature, and also support the master plan big idea of green spines. This vision aims to expand trails and open space spines in a web-like fashion connecting every resident to parks, trails, and open spaces with routes designated for biking, walking, and active transportation. Green spines encompass the vision to improve the ecological health of the open spaces and waterways, also capturing the community desires to have interconnected wellness and cultural trails. So this map illustrates all the physical recommendations on the plan. Some of the key elements on here are improving the north-south connections, acquiring new open space, and completing key trail gaps. The next series of slides I'm going to go through presents kind of overviews and the recommendations in each of the 4 themes. So starting here with community, our findings echoed those of the 2013 citizen survey that reveals Arvada residents consider access to parks and recreation one of the most important characteristics of the city as a whole. Residents want to activate and celebrate this important asset. So some of the key community recommendations include activating parks, trails, and open spaces, celebrating the breadth of the system, and increasing volunteers and volunteer opportunities. Specific action items related to increasing volunteerism includes expanding existing volunteer opportunities like Blund Reservoir rangers and hiring a volunteer coordinator to help plan and manage volunteer events. For parks, our analysis has shown that Arvada has done a really great job since the 2001 plan of providing neighborhood parks. 91% of Arvada residents are within a quarter mile to a half mile of a park. But as Arvada continues to grow, a key goal is to get all residents within a half mile of a park and to provide parks within a quarter mile if possible, as this is a more reasonable walking distance for seniors and families. So the park recommendations include providing urban park types in the urbanizing areas, providing new parks and improvements to existing parks, and expanding Arvada Parks' Taking Lasting Care program, a capital maintenance and replacement program. Specific action items supporting the park recommendations is to adopt new urban park typologies. These spaces, these urban parks, are typically smaller spaces that need a higher level of finish to withstand a greater amount of wear and tear in denser areas. Examples include festival streets, urban plazas, pedestrian promenades, and others. They do require a great amount of coordination with developers, Aura, and Public Works to implement some of these new urban park types. In thinking about wellness, Arvada residents want to expand the 149-mile trail system and access to healthy living. Studies support the fact that the way a park system, programs, and streetscapes are designed greatly benefit public health and wellness. Some of the wellness recommendations include completing the identified trail gaps, which are in alignment with the City Council strategic result and other planning efforts, trail planning efforts, enhancing the trail system, and encouraging access to healthy living for all. A critical component of the master plan includes understanding the trail gaps in Arvada, and the graphic you see highlights many of them up on the screen. We've worked closely with the staff to identify and prioritize these trail gap improvements in the master plan, and also identifying those that are developer obligations. Other specific wellness recommendations look to increase resident activity levels, improve pedestrian, equestrian, and bicycle circulation, and provide parks and trails for users of all ages and abilities. Thinking about nature, Arvada residents treasure the 3,400 acres of open space and scenic views and desire a balance between resource protection and public use. The nature recommendations include acquiring land for open space conservation, wildlife preservation, and recreation opportunities, connecting regional open space, and augmenting sustainability and stewardship measures within maintenance standards. Specific recommendations include defining different types of open space in Arvada that require different levels of maintenance and stewardship. So for example, there are 3 different types here. One is the traditional large open spaces we see in the western portions of Arvada. The second being narrower corridors and pockets around residential and commercial development. And third and lastly, the drainage corridors. So in thinking, well, how will this all get done? How will this be implemented? The master plan identifies funding opportunities, policy updates, staffing recommendations, and additional planning efforts to help achieve these recommendations. As a specific example of a funding opportunity is making impact fees more competitive. So the graphic you can see on your screen, Arvada's on the left and circled in the red box there. The development fees in Arvada are 2 to 5 times lower than benchmark cities in the Front Range. And in this plan, we're saying it warrants additional consideration. So in conclusion, Arvada has achieved great accomplishments since the 2001 plan, including adding 1,500 acres of open space, providing a neighborhood park within a half mile for 91% of Arvada households, and doubling the amount of trails since 2001. Arvada will continue to experience growth, and this community-led plan lays out priorities for how to maintain a high-quality park system while providing access to healthy living for the growing community. The recommendations and performance measures in the plan are aggressive, but we have been forged with the support of the community, staff, and the Arvada Park Advisory Committee. That's it. Thank you. Questions?
Are there any questions from the commission? Sorry? Oh,
Are we going
okay,
to
yeah,
public?
I'm sorry, yeah. Are there any questions from the public? I'm sorry, would any, let me hit the reset button. Thank you very much for your presentation. Would anybody like to speak in favor of the application? Please. And go ahead and state your name. I think you know the procedure, but spell it for us. Our recording devices are out tonight, so if you could spell them slowly so we can get them captured, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Brandon Figliolino, Figlio Lino. I live at 7893 Allison Way, Unit 302 here in Arvada. And as a member of the Park Advisory, I've been working with the design workshop and city staff and seeing this plan come to fruition, and I think it's fantastic. They've worked really, really hard and diligently on making sure that everyone gets something out of it, and I urge you to adopt it. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak in favor? Yes, sir. Likewise, can you spell your name for us and give us your address?
Sure. My name is Doug McGee, M-A-G-E-E, and I live at 7275 West 62nd Avenue here in Arvada. And just as background, I was invited to sit on the steering committee with the current members of the Park Advisory Committee. And in 2001, I was chair of the Park Advisory Committee when we did the last master plan. So I've been involved with the last 2 and really appreciated it. So I definitely support this plan. I think it's got great application to the things that the city needs to do with its parks and trails and open space. And you could see from the presentation by Design Workshop that it's a beautiful looking plan. I mean, it's well designed, it's easy to read, it's got stunning photos and graphs and charts. There's a lot of detail in it. I'm a detail-oriented person and like to know where information comes from, so they had good citations for the plans that they reviewed, the national trends they brought into where Arvada is doing well, where we're not. So I think it's a great plan, very fun to look at, and I enjoyed reading the 100-plus pages of it from front to back. I do have some specific comments of things that I really appreciated, enjoyed seeing in the plan, and then just a few comments I'd like to make. The first one, just as a hiker, I appreciated the inventory of all the trails and where potential trails could be, and the fact that Arvada is a leader among cities as far as the miles of trails per population. So I appreciated knowing that, and knew for years that we had a lot of trails. There's a lot of well-detailed, well-thought-out and detailed recommendations for funding. Not only sources for funding, but the amount of funding that could be available and the amount of money that the city already spends. Pretty stable amount of funding in many cases. I do like the idea to evaluate electric bikes on our trails. You know, those are becoming a little bit more popular and getting people to the commuter rail stations, I think, using electric bikes or other kinds of innovative modes of transportation would be good to look at. And also locating the restrooms at the trail hubs that are part of the plan, and where there would be certain kind of hubs with parking and those kind of things that I think should be looked at. So in the green spines, which is a key theme throughout this plan, which is a great idea and concept, in the prioritization criteria that's toward the end of the implementation section, there was one of the recommendations that I really strongly support, and that's to prioritize any incomplete projects that were part of park-specific master plans that have been done in the last 50 years, and prioritize those in conjunction with new park plans that could be done. So, and there's been a lot of park master plans or park plans, specific park plans that have been done, and I saw those being done during the many years I was on the Park Advisory Committee. So I know that there are some incomplete parts of those for many good reasons that they didn't totally get done. And one of those in particular I wanted to point out is in the Gold Strike Park Master Plan, and there is a bridge over Ralston Creek at Gray Street that would connect the southeast industrial area to this park and to Ralston Creek Trail. It not only meets a couple of the different criteria in this green spines criteria, servicing underserved populations, but also providing that north-south connectivity, because it would go due south from Gold Strike Park, and it would be just east of the existing railroad bridge and the new commuter rail bridge that the trail goes underneath. And I just think that's a trail connection that we've never made, and connecting it to that southeast area would be a great asset. And I know that was in that original Gold Strike master plan. So the two comments that I want to make as far as just criticisms, they're minor criticisms, but I did want to make them, put it on the record. The first one is there's a recommendation to digitally activate the parks. Now, I can see that from if you have these hubs where you've got restrooms and parking areas where people being able to access a park map, a trail map, where maybe locations are for certain things. I can see that, or for first responders. But I would suggest that we don't want to necessarily activate all of our parks, and probably not at all our natural open space areas. And part of that, later in the plan, there's a citation that youth today are dedicated to the screen, and they're spending too much time with the screen and not in outdoor activities. So I would just suggest to the city that they move slowly with this. And the analogies I would make to maybe making natural areas or open space areas not digitally activated would be similar to Jeffco Open Space, where they have hiker-only trails in some of their open space areas, or the federal level, Forest Service lands, wilderness areas are restricted as far as what kind of use you might see. So I would just take it cautiously, and let's not activate digitally all of our parks. I don't think that's really what we want to see. And the final point I want to make just is, and it was mentioned in the presentation, about the park development fees. I was surprised at how low our park development fees, and I know we've had stable funding for parks for many years, for decades, and I saw the fact that the city has negotiated with some developers to actually pay 100% of new park development and trails in those developments. I'd rather, instead of a piecemeal approach like this, I'd rather see a little bit higher level for those park development fees, and then the city obviously can negotiate with any developer if they want to expand the open space in their developments. But I think we need to raise those fees to at least not the top. We don't need to be above everybody else, but I think it makes sense to look at that as an option, that it would be consistent across the city, and then there can be case by case where the city asks for higher amounts. So just in closing, I think it's a wonderful plan. I enjoy looking at it. I'm sure I'll look at it many other times. It's rich in content. It's rich in ideas. And I encourage the Planning Commission to support it and then work with the city, the staff, and residents to see that it's implemented. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else from the audience who would like to speak in favor of the plan? Ms. Young. Again, go ahead and spell your name and give us your address. I think I have it memorized. I know.
Good evening. My name is Nancy Young, Y-O-U-N-G. It's very difficult. I live at 7706 Robinson Way here in Arvada. Good evening. I, too, love Arvada's parks, and I think our Parks Department has done a terrific job. I have one major concern: water. According to the utilities director here in Arvada, we have sufficient water resources right now to accommodate 125,000 people. With projects that have been approved to date, that is our population. There is a possibility of expanding our water resources if Gross Reservoir is expanded. To the best of my knowledge, that reservoir has not yet been permitted. Construction, if it is permitted, and there's some talk that Boulder County might not issue permits, but even if it is permitted, it will take 4 years to build, which probably in real time means 6 to 8 years. I did not see any references in this plan to potential water usage, nor did I see anything specifically addressing Parks Department conservation. I am very, very concerned about water. I believe that Arvada is on the brink of a disaster. We've had a very dry winter this year, and this summer should just be the tip of the iceberg of what could well be severe drought and perhaps even household water usage restrictions. That's my concern. Do not get me wrong, I love our parks. They are wonderful. But I do think that the water issue does need far, far more attention than it's been receiving. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak in favor of the application? No? Is there anybody who would like to speak against the application? No? So, I'm sorry. So normally we'd give you an opportunity for rebuttal. If you don't have to take it, but if there's something you'd like to clarify or address, feel free to take the time to do that.
I will mention one thing. So just about Ms. Young's comment there. Within, on page 117 of the plan, within the nature section, the third recommendation is augmenting sustainability and stewardship measures within maintenance standards. This does talk a lot about water conservation and just different, sustainability and stewardship measures. It also is paired with, all these efforts would need concurrent public outreach and environmental education. I think one thing we found throughout our work with the community on the plan is there's a strong desire for kind of resource conservation, water conservation, but it needs to be paired really closely with that outreach and education. So that's where that lives in the plan. The other thing is on page 118, you can see we're referencing some of the other documents, Sustain Arvada and the Water Conservation Plan.
Thank you. At this time, I will close the public input portion of the hearing and open the hearing for discussion, comments, and questions from the commission. Mr. Hannan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question for the applicant. In the policy recommendations, back one slide, we talked about no waiting, and then there's a little bit about that in the plan itself. Could you tell me more about what we mean by that?
Yeah, I'm going to have Amanda Jeter, also with Design Workshop, come up and talk a little bit about that.
Hi, yeah, when working with the staff and the public.
If I could just have you give her your name
Oh,
and
sure.
spell it, please.
Sorry, it's Amanda Jeter, Jeter, with Design Workshop. All right, thanks. So in working with the staff and the community, looking at a desire to be near water, Coloradans, if you look at recent reports and in talking with folks in Arvada, being around water and being in water is a really important recreation opportunity. And so currently there's a no waiting policy in Arvada, and so we're just recommending that that be looked at to see if there's appropriate areas where perhaps interaction with the water could be beneficial as a recreation amenity. So does that answer your question?
So we're asking to have it, I didn't realize there was a no waiting, which I've been violating for my 30-some years here in Arvada. So that's what we're talking about.
Yes.
We're not talking about establishing
No.
you can't get at Ralston Creek by the
No.
park. Okay, great, thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Rothschild?
Yeah, just a quick question with regard to the plan. Does it explicitly address, pun intended, the intersection between transportation and the trails with regards to cycling? Is that integral into the plan?
I guess I'm not sure we hit it specifically. We do talk about the trail hubs and how, I guess, let me just clarify, make sure I understand you. So when you mean transportation, you said transportation and the bike trails?
Bike lanes, for example, how they intersect and interact with the existing trail system.
Oh, okay, sorry, I definitely misunderstood. This plan doesn't look into exactly where that intersection is. One thing it does do as part of the trail system, not related to the on-road, is the recommendation to provide greater north-south connections with the trails. And those would be off-road facilities, though. But this does not go into the on-road facilities.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? No? All right, so seeing Mr. Goff.
Plan on making a motion.
Oh. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that CP 2016-0001, a resolution by the Planning Commission for the City of Arvada, Colorado, to amend the City of Arvada Comprehensive Plan 2014 to incorporate the Arvada Parks, Trails, and Open Space 2016 Master Plan in replacement of the 2001 version thereof be adopted.
Is there any discussion of the motion? Mr. Hannan.
It is an amazing amount of work that went into this, and the community input is phenomenal. And so thank you for both to the applicant and staff. Thank you for involving so many of us in getting us to this point.
Ms. Connell.
I would second that comment in that it provided information, and there is a goal to connect the trails, and you have addressed all the various types of recreation or usage of the trails. As a runner, I would say thank you for all of this, but also as a citizen, I would say a tremendous amount of effort went into it, and with the even an online survey. It was a little long, but I made it through and added a suggestion about possibly considering a running track, something like that, although that would require probably work and connection with Apex. But it's obvious that a lot of thought and effort for public input was included.
Is there any other discussion of the motion? No. Then, commissioners, cast your votes. And that passes 5 to 0. All commissioners present voting in favor. Thank you again and I would echo the same comments. There's obviously a lot of work, and it is, as the gentleman said, a very beautiful document. And at first I thought it was unnavigable, but actually the charts and the table of contents of that was very good once I opened my eyes. So thank you very much. All right, so we'll move on to the next hearing, which is the shops at Ralston Creek. Staff, are there any posting or notification requirements?
Yes, Mr. Chair, the applicant was required to send out letters to the surrounding neighborhood, which they did exceed the 400 feet requirement, and I have an affidavit of mailing that is in order. They also posted signs on the property, and their posting log is in order, as well as we published a notice on the local paper.
So the staff report, the posting log, and the affidavit of mailing are made a permanent part of the record. Are there any additions or corrections to the staff report?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Is there a representative of the applicant present? Can you go ahead and step up to the podium? You probably know the next question I'm going to ask. Can you spell your name for us and speak it slowly?
My name is Jim Loftus. Loftus is Loftus as in Sam.
And we'll need your address for the record as well, please.
My address is 8918 Catherine Court, Boulder, 80303.
Okay. You may proceed.
Okay. I wanted to also introduce my partner here for Ralston Creek North LLC is Jade Reaver, who will possibly answer some questions after the presentation. I simply wanted to make a couple comments. We were in the invited competition a few years ago when this property became available. Last year, we were able to reach an agreement with the Urban Renewal Authority in November, and at that point, we had a fair amount of confidence in the plan that we had been working on for about a year, which included using the existing Safeway building for a large user. Ultimately, this past fall, 2015, it ended up that we were not able to consummate an agreement with that user. So we amended our project, at least our phase one portion of that project, to the hard corner of Independence and Ralston. And that is what you're going to see this evening. We have taken the Safeway portion of the property and added that into what we're calling phase two, which is Arvada Plaza. And sometime in late spring or early summer, we will make a presentation to the neighborhood and then ultimately get into the process with staff. I'm going to introduce our architect who's been working on this for since we got involved, Tim Van Meter from Denver, and it's Van Meter, Williams, and Pollock.
Thank you, Jim.
And Mr. Van Meter, can you, I'm sorry, just spell your name and give us your address as well?
Yeah, I got it. I got the drill. Van Meter, V as in Victor, A-N, capital M-E-T-E-R, 2 words. 429 South Lincoln Street, Denver, Colorado. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here to present a real exciting project, a phase project. You know, we're here for a phase 1 approval of something we've been working at for a while, and it's a pleasure to be back here in Arvada that I first started working with ARA in 1999, so for 16 years. And it's really interesting to work with a community that actually implement what it plans. So the design workshop plan is really exciting, and you know the work that I know that went into that, I know will get implemented, and I'm bringing that up. How do I advance this? There we go. Okay. Dealing with right before you a 15-acre site. We call these gray fields, economically challenged areas, but you can see the really wonderful natural amenities that it has on touching edges on not only the watercourse way of Ralston Creek, which of course is where we're getting the names of shops at Ralston Creek, but also the Ralston Central Park. Wonderful amenities, and it was really really interesting to hear the previous presentation about those kind of community uses that are so important, you know, for recreation, for green, for open space, activity. And then you look at the screen that you're looking at right now, and it's kind of a black and white diagram of, you know, the yin and the yang, or something that's so wonderful, and then we have a strip shopping center, a tired one. So our job here is to revitalize this, to activate this. And our job here is really one of being implementers. Trying to advance this. All right. And implementing this is following the path of others. In 2003, I believe it was when the study and the community got together to start this whole idea of redeveloping this entire area. And our job here is to really follow the breadcrumbs. And part of that is working with the Arvada Triangle Design Guidelines, understanding what the community's wants, needs, and desires are, and to implement those. Not sure why everything is sideways, but it is. So this will be a challenge to present this project sideways. So following this is in 2011, I believe you approved an ODP, Official Outline Development Plan, that we're following up on with our PDP. And that defined, you know, several different visions of what this area could look like, and we're dealing just on this site, one little 4-acre piece. But it is the forerunner of other good things to come here. The ODP, you know, stipulated amount of uses. I'm sorry about this. I don't know why it's sideways. The uses and the intensity of the site. We're in parcel 9 here. I don't know if is it sideways on your screen too? You know, you can just kind of turn your head a little bit. You know, but we're at parcel 9 is saying it's 7, 8 plus acres. We're dealing with about half of that because the Safeway part will be in our phase 2 of the development. And it's basically stipulating a 1 to 3 story environment, X amount of square feet. And what we're showing you is a 1 and 2 story environment with about 30,000 square feet in 4 acres. This sketch was kind of an overall vision plan that we put together for the entire 15 acres to start engaging some thinking. And at the time, you're seeing not only our 4-acre site, but the Safeway site, and then potential things that could happen in phase 2. And we're just starting to scratch the surface of that right now. But we're really focused on that lower left hand of your screen. I like it that it's facing the right way. It makes it much easier. The 4 acres, and you're seeing 4 buildings there. And these 4 buildings are I like to call them mercantile buildings, because we don't know the end users in there yet. We have a pretty good idea. It's going to be a whole lot of good food. And this sketch is just showing is now you know, boiled down to what we're talking about here. And our job, again, is to follow the paths of others And it was kind of stipulating that an urban condition starts showing up here versus the existing condition with the strip shopping center, which tend to be auto-dominated, a place of no amenities for pedestrians. And our job here was to make the pedestrian an equal partner, not with the automobile, and then to augment the bicycling character of the area, because obviously we have a nice off-ramp for the Ralston Creek bike path that we're going to significantly plug into in our phase 2. But the design guidelines ODP said, put the buildings up on Ralston, get them up on the edge, let's get some friendly facades, let's get the parking in back, and let's make this about places and placemaking. And placemaking is a big word for places to congregate, hang out, and just maybe enjoy yourself, not necessarily in a shop. You'll see right at the corner of Ralston and Independence, we have about a 5,000 square foot plaza right there. That will be full of seating. That will have trees, breakout spaces, bust out spaces for some of the restaurants. A place that's always going to be in sunshine. The buildings face the front of Ralston are activated by a series of facades and glass and all the things you would have for mercantile buildings that could hold employment, but probably more on the retail side. And then we have a building in the on our 58th Street. So we're starting to create this east-west Main Street that was called for in the plan. You all call it West 58th. I like to call it our east-west connector right now, because someday it's going to connect over into Ralston Fields Park, and that's the important part, that we start putting the threads in place where our phase 2 can now seamlessly connect into this. So this is all retail right now. Obviously, phase 2 will have other uses into it. And this is where we are today, a less sexy drawing, but we're folding ahead here very quickly to move this project forward into the FDP and also into building permitting to get under construction as soon as we can. About 30,000 square feet, 4 acres, 156 parking spaces, good sidewalks all the way around, activated, I'd like to call them activated facades on 3 sides of the building and a service facade. In other words, less windows on the back. The reason of that is obviously if we have a lot of food here, we have kitchens, and kitchens, we can't have a bunch of windows where they're going to put kitchens. So we've got to kind of pre-design this a little bit to be able to handle the kind of tenants that we believe will be moving in here. There's another open space amenity up at Holland and West 58th there. We're doing multiple purposes with that as part of our detention, but we're also putting what's going to be an interesting wood boardwalk around it too, to help augment that building and some potential breakout uses with that. The buildings, I'll just walk around them quickly. Are, again, mercantile in nature. They're not trying to mimic anything of the past, and they're not, trying to say, look at me, modernism. They're kind of what I call the difficult in-between. Ones that can function for a multiple of users that we just don't know who they are yet. And, and that's important. Lots of glass, lots of transparency. Transparency helps us quite a bit knock down our energy use because it's called daylight. We have high ceilings in all these spaces that will be in here. Our south-facing windows are all shaded from the sun. In these kind of buildings, we don't have a heating problem, we have a cooling problem. So that's why you're seeing these visors come out of the building to knock down, because we have lots of glass to knock down the sunshine in the summertime. This is some elevations of building 1 and 2. The side and the back facade, or the service facade at the bottom. That screen wall is made out of wood, and that will screen our grease traps and some of our mechanical equipment that's sitting there on grade. So we have a pedestrian experience along the back also. That's really our service side of the buildings. Buildings mass to kind of break down the scale of them to the different users, so we can have individual identities to the type of users that will come in there. Building 3 is, we have a 2-story space in there. Jim's done this very successfully in Boulder a couple of times, that having these 2-story restaurant spaces that basically have a loft-like environment. You walk in there and you have a double height space like we're standing in. And then a loft seating environment for additional dining up there, and also an outdoor deck. And I'm 6'4", I stand in the site, my eyes are at 6 feet, and I'm starting to see some things that make this thing Colorado. And you get up in the air, so that deck, that rooftop deck up there, will be, about 16 feet in the air, and you're going to start getting peak-to-peak views. Obviously, because of the wonderful topography that we have in Ralston as it slopes south. Again, the side and the back side of Building 3. So the buildings are all related. They're kind of like brothers or sisters, not radically different from each other, but different enough. Our rear building is a one-story building, and what you're seeing is this kind of triangular form that's coming out of the building, and what that is we have two of those are staircases that are leading up to a second floor deck up there. Again, to take advantage of this building sitting in back, it's not right on Ralston, but we want to give them a significant amenity for a food service provider to go in there to have a rooftop deck. So they're looking over the other buildings and between the buildings itself. And that's how this one is massing. So the scale of these things, and we kind of call them high bay. They're not one story, they're kind of 1.5 story, but they're really just tall mercantile buildings for a variety of different users that we quite haven't met yet. And I was going to end on this great slide, but this is the snowstorm scheme. Did these show up on your stuff when I sent it to you? Well, we got some poltergeists in here, but I'll take questions. I was going to tell you more, but the whiteout.
It's been a crazy night, especially with the technology. Actually, what I'd like to do is we'll have you sit down now.
Okay.
And we'll open it to comments from the public.
Okay.
Is there anybody who would like to speak in favor of the application? Seeing none, we'll move on to vote. Anybody who would like to speak against? I think I have one sheet. Ms. Young?
Good evening. Would you like me to repeat my name and address?
Yes, please.
My name is Nancy Young. My address, that's Y-O-U-N-G. My address is 7706 Robinson Way in Arvada. I oppose this project. The so-called urbanism of it actually deprives the community of many nice features. The primary feature is by having the buildings right up against the sidewalk, the public is deprived of peak-to-peak views. The only people who get those are the paying customers. I'm also opposed to this because it basically ignores successful existing businesses. While they've been invited to become tenants in this new space, it appears that their monthly rent would quadruple in most cases and sextuple in some. That is really a rather astounding increase. I'm also very concerned and would like to add this to my objections. Your packet is incomplete. There were 2 neighborhood meetings for this project. Your packet only mentions one in July. The first neighborhood meeting was held, was held on May 27th at the King of Glory Lutheran Church. That meeting is not even mentioned. The room was set up for approximately 50 people. I counted 78 just before the meeting began. At that point, they began adding more rows and chairs. There could well have been over 100 people in the room that night. The concerns expressed at that meeting, as well as the meeting noted in your packet, well, the meeting noted in your packet talks about the historic Ralston Road. In the packet, they call it a wagon road. And just so to illustrate, I brought in this picture. Can we get the light table working? It's very similar to, can we get this a little bit bigger? 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 Ah, that's good. In the first slide shown by the applicant, this is a very similar view. Right down here is Ralston Road, which some people call West 58, but it is actually Ralston Road. And you see this little segment right here that curves. That segment is the original Ralston Road. That segment is the original stage road from Denver to Coal Creek Canyon. It is an historic asset to Arvada. It contributes to the community. At both meetings, the developer said, well, you know, maybe including that segment as perhaps a park might be a good idea. That was a suggestion. Now it appears in your notes as, oh, just some wagon road that, hey, we don't care about. Some of us do. And that original Ralston Road was there at least through the 1970s. Another item that people mentioned at this first meeting, where close to 100 people showed up, was the notion of the displaced businesses and very little accommodation for them. There was lots of concern mentioned about high-density housing on its way. I acknowledge that this particular project is not housing, but it was mentioned at that meeting. There were a number of concerns about subsidizing a developer for a business space that many people felt was not necessary. Spiffing up the existing Arvada Plaza would be less expensive and more appreciated by the community. And finally, deep, deep concerns about parking and traffic in the neighborhoods from this development. It is my understanding that there's a provision for something like 5 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet, somewhere in that vicinity. Businesses like this often require 10 to 15 spaces. Look at a Starbucks. Anytime you go to a Starbucks, there's going to be 15 or 20 cars outside. If a Starbucks comes to this area, where are those people going to park? In the neighborhoods. Look at the traffic that's going to bring through the neighborhoods. Overall, those were the concerns expressed at that first meeting, which was not included in your packet. I don't think this development is good for Arvada. I think it is destructive to the community's character. It will destroy yet another historical asset which has been around here for 140 years, and therefore I oppose the development. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Is there anybody else who would like to speak against the application? All right, I'd like to offer an opportunity for rebuttal to the applicant.
Jim Loftus. The first neighborhood meeting that was held was held before we were in process. And when we first were talking to the Urban Renewal Authority and the staff about the type of process that we'd be getting into, it was suggested that a voluntary neighborhood meeting would be a good idea. And one of the slides that was not sideways, that you saw a few minutes ago, showed an overall potential master plan as to what, there it is, what the property could look like. And we had that at the first meeting. And the meeting was well attended, and I would suggest that the greatest percentage of questions that were asked of us at that time were about what we call phase 2. And they said, tell us about the buildings that border the creek and border the park. And the response was, this is an idea and a thought, and these are just site plans showing potential buildings. At that time when we did this stuff, there were no elevations, there was no massing. So the second neighborhood meeting was one that was required to be in process. And again, we thought the people liked the phase 1 things that we were presenting, and there were some questions about the Safeway building, which we were intending to lease to an outfit called 24 Hour Fitness. Again, maybe 50% of the questions were about phase 2. And the answers again for phase 2 was, we're just trying to show what we think could be here. In regard to the question or the statement that I remember speaking to Mrs. Young at the first meeting, the one that was off the record, where she informed me about the old Ralston Road that went through the property, and asked me if I knew its historic character. And I professed that I didn't know anything about the historic character. I only knew what was there and what we intended to vacate, in terms if we were able to go ahead and get a project done. So I don't remember saying that we would incorporate it into a design or give strong consideration to incorporating it into a design. The hard corner at Independence and Ralston, Independence and 58th Street, has essentially been the same since the first day that we submitted to the neighborhood meeting, and that we presented to the city staff for after the final comments that staff presented us on whether or not we were in concert with the rules and regulations of the city of Arvada.
Okay, thank you. I will now close the public input portion and take questions and comments from the Planning Commission. Mr. Hannan.
A couple of questions for the applicant. I think mostly the triangle design guidelines talk about walkability. When I'm looking at this portion at phase 1, I'm really not seeing much of a way to get there from the north or from the east. Am I just missing it because it's hanging underneath the tree diagrams there?
You're talking pedestrian?
Yes.
Walking from the north?
Yeah, well, yeah, yep. So that would be from the Safeway side.
Okay, yeah. So we need to complete phase 2 to have a complete project.
Okay.
Yes, no, we're putting the threads in place, the bones in place that connect to with the phase 2 that will help us get, from the Ralston Creek, to this and to points beyond. So this is the first phase of an overall plan that will come together.
Okay. Is Holland Street going to be pedestrian only, or is that vehicle?
No, it's going to be vehicle. It's also going to have 2 bike lanes on it.
Okay, good.
As well as 58th Place.
Okay. The rooftop deck, which I think was on building 4, which direction will it look?
It will look west and south.
Okay.
As will building 3. There's a deck there also.
And the distance between buildings 2 and 3 and Ralston Road?
The distance, okay, you're saying from the building face to the curb?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had 22 feet. Staff wanted 4 of that, so we have 18
Okay.
for potential widening of the future Ralston Road.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Rothschild.
Yeah, a few more questions for staff. Don't step away yet. Come on back. Come on back.
You don't need my name again, do you? You got it, 2 words, two capitals? Okay.
Can you, traffic flow standpoint, the entryway in the middle of the development,
Yeah,
is that an entryway?
yes.
And why do you feel that's needed, I guess?
It's for, I guess for convenience. It's a right in, right out, so it's not full movement. You can only go right in, right out of the development. So we're not forcing everything through the back. It's to allow a greater amount of connectivity.
I guess my suggestion, Ralston Road's tough enough. I'm not sure if that's needed, but between staff and yourself, you can work that out.
Yeah,
But-
we spoke at length with staff, about that, and, the critical points are that they're far enough away from the intersections, and as you can see, we're dead center between Holland and Independence.
And then just another sort of design comment, you'll have to work it
Sure.
out in the long run, which is the open space right at the corner of Ralston and Independence. That's a design feature at some other facilities around the city. I personally find it, if you're going to use that as a dining area for all these restaurants, it's sort of smelly and noisy. So I'm not sure if that's the best use or if there's a way to protect that more so it's really more attractive to users.
Yeah, no, it's a good observation, and design does matter at that point. So, it's a small drawing that you're looking at there, but if you can visualize, there's a planter about yay high that buffers from the street, okay, on 2 sides, and that planter is about 3-4 feet deep, and it's going to be heavily planted. And on the other side of that is where we have kind of seats, tables, and gathering areas. So this is something that Jim and I did a number of years ago in Boulder. Same condition. Actually the exact same orientation too. On North Broadway, a street that gets far more traffic than Ralston, and heavily utilized.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, it's an urban condition, not for everybody, which is why we have other amenities or other places.
All right, thanks. And then a quick question for staff. I'm not sure if at this point in the process, is there any restrictions to drive-throughs on these restaurants, or is that allowed, not allowed?
The way they designed it does not include the drive-through, so if they were going to do that, they would have to come through the process.
Again.
But, yeah.
Okay,
but
so the
currently,
way-
that's not how they're showing it, so,
And the way we would be approving it is without drive-throughs?
right.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Goff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a few questions. First one regarding the road. Just can you, this is for staff regarding specifically widening Ralston Road. I from prior conversations, I know there's some intent in widening Ralston Road to the east, but is there a plan to make Ralston Road wider at this development at this point or prior to developing this phase 1?
Ralston Road is, it fans out, it starts to widen out as you go west. And so there is a section that is, has narrower lanes, and the goal is to widen those lanes to the standard roadway lane width, so that, for example, trucks or buses will not ride in the gutter and be close to, say, the roadside landscape and sidewalks.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, as I look at it from a typical commercial facility with offices, such a 5 per 1,000 is a very nice parking ratio. But if the majority of these are restaurants, is there any is 5 per 1,000 based on history and information you have from existing businesses, is that adequate?
As far as the planning
Parking ratio.
department, in terms of, that is our standard for commercial. Again, it indicated that the users, they're still trying to figure what those are. So it is on the high end, 5 per thousand. And then we also look at seats for restaurants. You know, how many seats within a restaurant. And so that's still to be determined, but based on what they were proposing and the uses, we feel that this is accommodating. And then as the development starts, I guess, phase 2 going in, we would be looking more into those shared parking for the other side as well. But again, this was looked at 5 per thousand is what our current code provides.
Okay, thank you.
And they did meet that as well.
Thanks. That's all for now.
Ms. Connell?
This question would be for the developers. And it relates in reference to developing one part. And so this then would possibly generate interest in developing phase 2 once persons see that phase 1 is under construction. So
your question,
my question is, phase 1, once it's developed, then would possibly draw more interest for other developers for the phase 2, or how many other phases that
well, it's
would?
our agreement with the Urban Renewal Authority is to buy the entire parcel, and we have a couple years to do that per our purchase contract. So it's our intent to clean the site once it's vacated. As an example, I would say by the end of May, we hope to have the Safeway building down, and the 4 or 5 buildings that are up in front on the hard corner, when those buildings are vacated, and they were given notice to vacate, they were given a 6-month notice to vacate, and I think that notice was given sometime around the end of December, so I think they'll be there a while. But it's our intent then to have a clean corner where we're doing a new development that shows a little more modern day construction with some food uses, and then to come up with a mixed-use design for the second phase. And about 3 or 4 weeks ago, the architect started some design work in terms of site planning. So that's the goal, to create some food places and some other places. And I didn't want you to think that this is just a food thing we're trying to do. Actually, as we were talking with some of the leasing brokers, the suggestion was, based on our parking count, that although some food users do require 10 spaces per thousand, there will be other users who, if at their busiest, might require 2 or 3 spaces per thousand. So the hope is that if we do the leasing somewhat correctly, that it's all going to balance out.
Thank you.
Is Mr. Rothschild?
Another quick question for the architect. It's hard to see on the scale drawings that I have. Have you accommodated for bicycle parking in this?
Yes.
Where is that, just out of curiosity?
Oh, where's our bike parking? This is why our landscape architect is not here to put me on the hot spot, but I believe we have 56 bike parking spaces.
Really? Be impressive.
So can I get back to you on that?
Sheet 9 of 12, Ed, shows
What's
it.
that?
Sorry, got to turn my mic on. Sheet 9 of 12 shows 4 U-bike spaces for 8 bikes on building 3, same thing on building 2.
8 and 8.
And then there's 6 over by building 1 on the
Yes.
south side.
Gotcha. Thank
Yes.
Yeah, I stumbled across
The
it
others
just
are,
then.
yeah, the 56 was the overall that we had at one time, just for the commercial. That was for the overall master plan. But thank you for saving me.
No homework to
Getting
do.
back to us is not a good idea.
No, I had to sit down and go through the plan where that was. I knew it was in here.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, so seeing no further requests for discussion, is there a motion? Mr. Goff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that PDP 2015-0010, the shops at Ralston Creek, preliminary development plan 9517 Ralston Road, be recommended to City Council for approval, subject to the conditions stated in the staff report, items 1 and 2, page 14. This motion is based on the findings of fact and approved criteria on pages 12 and 13 of the staff report.
Is there any discussion of the motion? Mr. Hannan?
Being one of the people that in the parks presentation is aging in place, I appreciate the way this has been presented and done. When Denver built Stapleton and Aurora built on Lowry, both of them built tons and tons of houses and residences, and then started throwing an occasional service in to meet the mixed use requirement. This is mixed use the way it should be done, and I congratulate you on that. The Ralston wagon train is part of Arvada's history. We walked away from that in the 70s when we pulled out that portion of road that goes by Triangle Liquors. So we kind of passed away from that. It might be a good idea to consider your promenade in the southwest corner to somehow indicate that that is the site that it used to be at, a historic marker or something like that to remember our past.
All right, if there's no further discussion, commissioners, please cast your votes. And that passes 5-0 with all commissioners present voting in favor. And yeah, thank you very much. Clearly a lot of thought and work has gone into this. Looks like it'll be an attractive project, and I'm very excited to see what phase 2 looks like as well. So I know there's a lot of folks that are eager to see what that looks like. So I think you'll know already to continue to work with staff, and you know, they'll help you understand how to get to the next phase with City Council and whatnot. So, staff, moving on to other items, is there anything else that we need to consider tonight?
Your next commission meeting is scheduled for March 22nd, and it will be in regards to a neighborhood grocer located at 64th and Joyce. And there will be 3 components to that: a comprehensive plan amendment, rezoning, and a preliminary development plan.
All right. And with that, we are adjourned.